the preferred political structure of Satanism is communism. It is important to understand that communism is sold as for the people, by the people, of the people. That it is the people's movement. And this is how it has been sold in all of the locations on your planet where it has successfully taken root. However, these movements to literally transform the entire political landscape of a nation and also the cultural landscape and so on is a movement which requires considerable funding. And this considerable funding isn't coming from the people. Instead, it is coming from Hi, it's Muzz, iEvolv. Thank you for being here again this week when there are so many other things that you could be doing. I really appreciate it. If you haven't read my book yet, I don't have it here at the moment. I'll put it on the screen. There it is. So if you haven't read that yet, now is the time to read it. If I receive any feedback, it's always that it was not a good read, but really a mind-blowing read or a fantastic read or a really great read. So if you haven't read it yet, now is the time. If you would like to receive a private channeling from me, then you can see below here, there are a bunch of links. One of those links will go to where you can purchase the book. Another one of those links will go to where you can make an inquiry about having a private channeling with me. It doesn't commit you to anything, just starts the conversation. And on to today's question. Why is the West moving towards communism? Greetings and thank you for the question. Why is the West moving towards communism? We have decided to channel on this today because it is, on a political basis, very, very relevant to the current state of the human field, particularly in the West. But this will eventually spread to include all corners of the Earth human experience. There are many of you who are aware that this is what is occurring and you do not wish to head in that direction, and so you are offering some resistance. And then there are those who are aware but are championing this to occur. And there is yet the largest contingent that are blissfully unaware that the West is edging towards, on the verge of becoming a communist regime. So, in this discussion, we would like to give an explanation of why this transition is occurring, and also give an explanation of why there are those among you who are good in heart and have good intent, but are still championing this ideology, this political concept. It does not seem to make sense from the perspective of those that understand what it will entail. So why is it that these good people are championing it? So, let us begin in this way. First, we'll establish the evidence that the West is heading towards a communist regime. And it can be illustrated in a single phrase. And that phrase is, "You will own nothing and be happy." This was uttered by the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab. And when you look at this statement, this tagline, you can recognize that it is a condensation of the basic tenet of communism. The Communist Manifesto was written by two men, and one of those authors was Karl Marx. And so the ideology, which is the basis on which communism is built as a political structure, is called Marxism. And in this Communist Manifesto, there were 8 main principles And these main principles can be reduced to a concept which is very similar to that tagline. And this principle is that there will be no property rights. The state will own everything. And so when Klaus Schwab says, you will own nothing and be happy, really what he is saying is you will own nothing and be enslaved. Because if you are in a system where there are no property rights, then what right do you have which protects you from exploitation, that protects you from being cast into the street? And there are none. Property rights are absolutely essential for individual liberty. So, this idea of communism is not all entirely bad, because it does have its place. This concept or this political structure does have its place in a normal functioning society. However, it is confined within the walls of your own family home. When you have a partner and you have children, then the functioning of your home will depend upon there being a centralized governing authority that owns everything and also is responsible for distributing the resources, the wealth, the food, and so on. This is a family unit that is functioning healthily. The parents own virtually everything. They also distribute the resources as needed by the children. And so when the political environment is discussed, it is usually discussed in a very this or that manner. However, when a society is allowed to be organic, what will occur is there will be a this and that paradigm where all political ideology, political structures which make sense will all be coinciding at the same time. So for example, if you are a communist structure inside your home, then in your immediate community, where there are the people that you know and your children go to school together, you've known each other for many years, your friends, in this environment, this extended community, then it is a socialist structure, which makes the most sense because you are helping each other. And so you don't necessarily need to be purchasing from each other, but rather you can be trading with each other. So if you have the beef and your neighbor has the wheat, then you can decide to trade in this way. And you can make sure that others in your society have everything that they need in your immediate community. This is socialism. But then when you are looking at selling or trading your surplus to receive something which you don't actually have in your immediate community. So perhaps you are a land-based community and you would like to have fish. And so you will do trade with another community, which is on the coast. And in this relationship, you can be a capitalist type structure where you are literally selling to them some of your beef, some of your wheat, and then they are selling back to you in return some of their fish. And if there is a surplus, if there is a financial surplus, a profit, then that profit can be used to increase the prosperity of the community. And then also this idea of conservatism and liberalism. Even these play some role. So, if you are going to have a internal perspective of what is going on with the people in your own nation, then it makes sense to be liberal in that you ensure all community groups in your society, in your country, have what they need so that the children are healthy, people are employed, and the level of education and medicine and so on are of a minimum standard, which would be ensuring that each of these communities are receiving what is their human right. And then when looking outside of the country, then it can be more of a conservative perspective, of a nationalistic perspective, where you are perhaps helping other nations or trading with other nations, but always the priority is the people of your own nation. So, we understand that these are very controversial subjects within the human context, particularly in the West, particularly in the last decade. However, what we were trying to illustrate here, because there is going to be some that disagree with what we have just said, and if there was a dive into the nuance, then there is more to add to this very basic overview that we have laid out. But the main principle we wish to illustrate here is that all of these political and ideological perspectives do have their place. And in an organic society, they all coexist at the same time. And each is applied in the environment where it is most suitable. But the way that your politics has been hijacked is that it must be one or the other. And ultimately, this is laying the garden bed or the foundation for eventually you being ushered into a completely communist society. In fact, it won't just be communist, it will be a communist fascistic society. So it will be communism and fascism coinciding. Now, when you hear this, this may give some reason for confusion, because on the political spectrum, as it is commonly thought about in your societies, on one end at the extreme of the left perspective is communism, and then on the extreme of the right perspective is fascism. However, again, this is yet another red herring which has the intention of confusing you, because fascism and communism are very similar in one fundamental way, and that is they are totalitarian. And so the political spectrum shouldn't be thought of as this linear two opposite poles, but rather as being circular. And so at the bottom where these two ends meet, there is fascism and communism directly side by side. And then at the top of this loop is libertarianism, is freedom. And so it is not left versus right, but rather freedom versus slavery. This is the correct way to think about the political structure, because when it is thought of in this way, then you can see that anything which is gravitating towards fascism or communism is at the bottom of this circle and is antithetical to freedom. The preferred political structure of Satanism is communism. It is important to understand that communism is sold as for the people, by the people, of the people. That it is the people's movement. And this is how it has been sold in all of the locations on your planet where it has successfully taken root. However, these movements to literally transform the entire political landscape of a nation and also the cultural landscape and so on is a movement which requires considerable funding. And this considerable funding isn't coming from the people. Instead, it is coming from the beneficiaries of a communist society. Because the communist structure is that you have one class of people. So everybody has been homogenized. Everybody has the same level of prosperity in a general sense. And then this equality is maintained by a governing structure. And this governing structure exists to make sure that everybody is treated equally. Everybody gets what they deserve. There is no injustice of inequality. But one must ask, who is this centralized authority that is determining what is fair, what is equal, what is unfair, what is inequitable? This governing authority is the elite. It is the ultra wealthy, ultra powerful, the dynastic families that have existed for a long time. They are the ones who comprise this centralized governing authority. So, the CCP. If you were to look closely at the CCP, you will see that it is not just a collection of individuals that share an ideology, but instead it is a collection of families who are behind the curtain, and they are the beneficiaries of all that is made possible through the communist structure. So when there is no property rights, when all production, all prosperity is owned by this centralized authority and then distributed to the people receive a subsistence level of prosperity. And the vast majority is hoarded in this governing body. And so the elite, the dynastic families, go from being very wealthy to utterly wealthy, to wealthy beyond imagination, because now they are withdrawing the productivity of an entire nation of people and giving in return only enough to sustain them. This is slavery. So, you will own nothing and be happy really is you will own nothing and be enslaved. So, one must ask, if this is really what is going on, if communism isn't for the people, by the people, of the people, but is rather an elitist con on an industrial scale, why is it there are so many within the populace that are championing this idea of communism? The champions of communism can be divided into two groups. There are those within the general populace who are not part of the cabal, who are the champions of communism. And they protest in the streets, and they are activists, and they infiltrate different levels of education and so on, so they can continue to further these ideas because they themselves have been indoctrinated. And then there are the other champions who are the ultra wealthy, the ultra powerful, those that provide the funding, because they understand when the communist structure finally takes root that they will be in this elitist class that are the beneficiaries of all the resources that are stolen from the slave class beneath them. So, those within the slave class who champion communism, yes, they have been indoctrinated, but also it is the recognition of an intuitive sense that humanity, in its organic presentation, when it is allowed to flourish, will take care of each other, will form a unity where each person's needs, from the perspective of maintaining basic human rights, will be ensured. And it just makes sense that if the human species have a love for each other, then this will just be a matter of course. And so there are those within the slave class that have this sense. And so that is why they so passionately support this idea or principles or any type of change which is heading towards this direction. Because they have a sincere desire and love to ensure that every human receives the basic human rights, that they have housing, that they have food, that they have health, education, and so on. So, it is from a good place, and it is a sincere desire for the well-being of all of their fellow human beings. However, it is naive because there is the existence of a unified malevolence that have the pledged agenda to usurp the entire planet and anoint themselves as the kings and queens, the gods and goddesses of the earth human experience, taking ownership of all resources, including humanity. So, in this environment, it is very dangerous to be the champion of any political conceptualization which involves a single centralized authority having dominion over a much larger subclass. So, we said earlier that any political or force which oppresses the expression of the light isn't something which is good for humanity. Now, this brings up questions. For example, if my child is playing on the road, because that's what my child really wants to do. My child, in those moments, is filled with love and light because they're in such a joyous state while they're playing on the road. Yet, I don't want my child to play on the road because clearly that's a dangerous choice. So if I go and take my child off the road or order them off the road or make them go into the backyard or whatever methodology I use to take them out of that danger, am I oppressing them? Am I inhibiting their free expression of the light? And the answer to this is no, you are not. Because ultimately, you and your child have the same desire. And this ultimate desire is not just to be joyful in the moment, but is also to have the capacity to have subsequent moments, sequential moments, moments into the future, which also have the potential to be joyful, to be prosperous, to be filled with the opportunity for receiving wisdom and love and so on. And as you both have this desire, then your perspective as you are older, as you're an adult, that choice of playing on the road negates or limits or reduces the opportunity that this larger objective will be achieved. Means that it is in your best interests as well as it is in the child's best interests to remove them from the road. So it is not a suppression of the light, but rather it is a facilitation of the furtherment and the growth of the light in your child. So, let us finish in this way. It is important to remember and to be aware that your governments, your international bodies, your institutions have been infiltrated and mostly captured by minions of this agenda marching towards global communism. This is the child or the crowning glory of the cabal of darkness, to have this global communist planet or communist fascistic planet. And so it is imperative that you not only share this understanding, but that you also do not comply. Because it is only through humanity's compliance that the cabal of darkness has got as far as it has gotten. And it is only humanity's continued compliance that will take their mission all the way to the finish line. Humanity is very, very close, dangerously close to being fully captured and consumed into a communist fascistic grip that would take a very long time to break free of. And if you look at some of the elements that are already pre-existing in your society and those that are coming on the horizon, it is clear that humanity is very close. Having a centralized governing body that controls the printing and the distribution of money in a society, this is a fundamental tenet of communism. And so centralized banking has already been around in the West for 100 years, where it is a private institution that is not part of the government, has given itself the right through blackmail, through exploitation, through corruption, nepotism, and so on. It has made its way into the government organisation such that the right to print money has been stolen from the Treasury, stolen from the people, and given to this private institution, which is privately owned. And they now print the money, and the governments of nations must borrow the money from that private institution. And then the money must be paid back with interest. And so the taxes that you and all those within your nation, all those of every nation, a portion of that tax is specifically to service the debt and repay these loans to this centralized bank. So humanity already on a global basis has been enslaved. The difference is your slavery at the moment is not complete. How much tax do you pay? Are you paying 30% tax? If so, then you are 30% enslaved. When a person is fully enslaved, then 100% of their productivity goes to someone else, and none of it is theirs. If you are paying 30% tax, then 30% of your productivity is already going to an external body. So it could be thought of as being 30% enslaved. So communism, 75% of it is achieved simply by the institution of a centralized banking system. And what is on the horizon now, literally months away, is the arrival of the central bank digital currency. And when this central bank digital currency is rolled out, and through a manner of different mechanisms and Hegelian dialectics, false flags, you will be forced into that system simply so that you can survive. This is on your horizon. This is coming. You will find yourself in the future, particularly if you are not preparing now, where you have been cornered and your only way out is to enter the central bank digital currency system so that you can literally survive tomorrow, survive next week, survive next month, so that you can pay your bills, so that you can feed your children. Once you are that reliant on the system, then your societies will be very close to being 100% communist. The most fundamental tenets, underlying structure, will already be in place. And then it will just be a matter over time of implementing the final parts of the change using this centralized bank and digital currency system as the blunt instrument which beats you into submission. Because if you go against the principles, then you'll be denied the ability to transact. And when you are contained in your 15-minute cities, you will be essentially a human farm animal. And the 15-minute city will be your pen. You will not be allowed to leave this area. And if you do leave this area, and you are now 1 mile outside of your designated zone, and you try to purchase a bottle of water, the transaction will not be possible because you are out of your specified zone. And if you wish to drink, if you wish to eat, if you wish to be housed, you will have no choice but to return to your smart city, your 15-minute zone. Because it's only when you return that you will be able to buy these necessities. And even more so than this, the money that you are awarded through a universal basic income, because your infrastructure, your small business, middle class, it'll be destroyed. And the only mechanism of survival, of having what you need to buy the resources to feed yourself and your family, will make you reliant on the government giving you a stipend, giving you a universal basic income. And that universal basic income will be on the central bank digital currency platform. And so they will have a record of every single penny you spend. And if you attempt to spend it on something which they have deemed illegal, or a privilege you have not been awarded, then it will not be permissible, and perhaps you will be fined. And then at the end of your period, perhaps 1 month, as you receive these stipends monthly, if you have not spent all of your digital currency by the end of the month, it will expire. And then you will receive a fresh universal basic income at the beginning of the next month. And all that wasn't spent will have been gone. Because essential to this system is the ongoing consumerism. And so now that they have you into this centralized digital currency platform, they can force your consumerism, which is another way of saying you'll never be able to save again. And so the collection of assets in your personal wealth portfolio will virtually become impossible, because you will not be able to save to buy a home or to buy other assets. So, we do not wish to be doom and gloom, but it is very important that you become fully awakened to where you are at this time. Humanity ultimately prevails, but the descent has not yet ceased. You have not yet reached the bottom. And so, how far down you go on this slippery slope is up to you. And by you, we mean you, the humanity being. So, each of these individual units, of which you are one, must be aware and awake and start making the choice to not comply and also fulfill their duty to spread these understandings, to ensure that those around you don't mindlessly walk into the trap. Because once you are in the trap, it is going to be very, very difficult to escape. So, we hope that you can feel the sense of urgency as you edge so close towards this totalitarian endpoint, which the Cabal of Darkness have been working towards for such a long time. But even though they have been masterful and brilliant in their strategy and their tenacity and patience to bring it about over generations, humanity still has the power to stop it like that, simply by taking away your consent, by refusing to comply. And this is going to be made all the more easier if you prepare now, if you have an off-ramp, so that when the economy and the financial system is under such great stress that the only viable option will be to enter the central bank digital currency platform, you will already be in a state of preparation so that you can go a different way. And there are many who are already in this state of preparation, and we are hoping that you are too. So, this was a darker discussion than usual. However, understand the light ultimately wins. Humanity ultimately finds its way into the fourth density state to exist as the unity within the golden age. So, have hope, have optimism, but also be awake, be aware, have your wits about you, so that when the time comes, you are prepared and can go your own way. Thank you, and we love you.